I want you to do something right now. Go to your medicine cabinet. Pick up any bottle of medicine. Any bottle. Painkiller. Vitamins. Cold medicine. Anything. Look at the seal around the cap. That seal, that small strip of plastic or foil that you break every time you open a new bottle, was not always there. Before 1982, medicine bottles did not have tamper-proof seals. Food packaging did not have tamper-proof seals. Almost nothing you bought at a drugstore had any protection between the factory and your hands. You picked it up off the shelf. You took it home. You trusted it. Because why would you not? And then, in the first week of October 1982, in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, 7 people opened a bottle of the most popular over-the-counter painkiller in America, took what the label said to take, and died. Not from an illness, not from an overdose, not from any mistake they made. They died because someone, an unknown person, had walked into drugstores across the Chicago area, removed bottles of medicine from the shelves, opened them, replaced some of the capsules with capsules filled with one of the deadliest poisons known to chemistry, and put the bottles back, and then walked out, and went home, and was never caught. That person, whoever they are, changed how every product in the entire world is manufactured and packaged. They changed federal law in the United States. They caused the largest consumer product recall in American history at that point. They sent a nation into a panic so complete that Halloween was canceled in cities across America because parents were afraid of what might be in anything their children were given. And they were never identified, never charged, never found. The tamper-proof seal you just touched exists because of them, and they are possibly still alive today. If that story made you put down your medicine bottle, good subscribe before we go any further, because this channel covers the cases that changed the world and left no one accountable. To understand the full impact of what happened, you need to understand what the world looked like before it. The over-the-counter painkiller market was one of the most trusted product categories in American retail. The specific painkiller at the center of this story, a brand that had dominated the market since the 1960s, was in virtually every American home. It was the medicine parents gave their children. It was what doctors recommended after surgery. It was the first thing people reached for when they had a headache, a fever, a pulled muscle, any ordinary human pain. It was trusted completely, implicitly, without question. And that trust, that complete unexamined trust, was exactly what made it the perfect vehicle for what someone was planning. The drugstore itself was a place of absolute safety in 1982. You walked in. You picked something off the shelf. You paid for it. You took it home. Nobody questioned whether what was inside the bottle was what the label said it was. Nobody checked. Nobody had any reason to check. The idea that someone might walk into a drugstore, remove products from the shelves, tamper with them, and replace them was not a thought that existed. Not in the minds of consumers. Not in the minds of retailers. Not in the minds of regulators. Not in the minds of manufacturers. It had simply never happened before. And then, it happened. And the world that existed before that week, the world where you picked up a bottle of medicine and trusted it without thinking, never came back. September 29th, 1982. A 12-year-old girl in the Chicago suburb of Elk Grove Village wakes up with cold symptoms. Her father goes to the bathroom cabinet and gives her the recommended dose of the painkiller the family keeps at home. She collapses shortly afterward. She is taken to the hospital. She does not survive. Her father and another family member who had also taken capsules from the same bottle are hospitalized. One of them does not survive either. The deaths are initially assumed to be the result of some unknown sudden medical event. 3 people from the same family collapsing in the same house. The possibility of carbon monoxide poisoning or some environmental factor is considered first. But across the Chicago area, in different suburbs, in different homes, people who have no connection to each other are dying in the same way. A 27-year-old postal worker, a 31-year-old flight attendant, a 35-year-old mother of two. All of them, within the first days of October 1982, collapsed after taking the same product. By the time investigators began connecting the deaths, 7 people were dead. The connection was made not by a large federal agency with sophisticated resources, but by 2 off-duty firefighters listening to the emergency calls on a scanner who noticed that multiple people dying suddenly in the Chicago area had all taken the same product. They called the police. That phone call changed everything. When investigators tested the capsules from the bottles connected to the deaths, they found that some capsules had been opened, emptied, and refilled with potassium cyanide, one of the fastest acting and most lethal poisons in existence. The amount placed in each capsule was estimated to be 65 to 100 times the lethal dose. Whoever did this was not trying to harm one person. They were trying to kill anyone who opened that bottle. What followed was one of the most significant public health panics in American history. Within hours of the connection being made, Chicago police drove through neighborhoods with loudspeakers warning people not to take the product. Television stations interrupted programming with emergency announcements. Within 24 hours, the manufacturer had issued a voluntary recall of every bottle of the product in the Chicago area. Within 2 hours, they had recalled 31 million bottles across the entire United States. 31 million bottles, pulled from every shelf, in every drugstore, in every supermarket, in every hospital, across the entire country. The cost of the recall was estimated at over $100 million. People across America were throwing away medicine cabinets full of product. Not just the specific brand, everything. The panic extended beyond the specific product, beyond the specific brand. People were afraid of anything in a capsule, anything in a bottle, anything that had ever been on a shelf that a stranger could have touched. Halloween 1982, less than 4 weeks after the deaths, was effectively canceled in large parts of America. Cities issued warnings. Schools sent letters home. Parents refused to let children accept anything unwrapped, anything in a container, anything that could have been opened and resealed. The psychological damage that 7 deaths in the Chicago suburbs inflicted on the entire country was disproportionate to a scale that no one had anticipated, because the fear was not irrational. If someone could poison medicine on a drugstore shelf, what could they not poison? The question had no reassuring answer, and the person who had created that question was still out there, unknown, unidentified, free. The investigation that followed was one of the largest in FBI history to that point. Every bottle connected to the deaths was examined. Every drugstore where tampered bottles were found was canvassed. Every person who worked at those stores, every customer who had been seen in the area, every person who had purchased the product in the weeks before the deaths was investigated. The FBI analyzed the tampered capsules with extraordinary care. What they found, and what they were able to establish about the method, was that the tampering had been done with considerable deliberateness. The capsules had been carefully opened, the 2 halves twisted apart, emptied of their contents, refilled with potassium cyanide, and closed again. This process had been done to individual capsules, not to entire bottles. Only some capsules in each bottle had been tampered with. The randomness was deliberate. By tampering with only some capsules, the killer ensured that not every person who opened a tampered bottle would die, which made tracing the source harder and slower. The bottles themselves had been bought at multiple different stores across the Chicago area, suggesting the killer had moved systematically through multiple locations. The tampering appeared to have been done after purchase. The bottles taken, tampered with at a separate location, and then returned to store shelves. This meant the killer had entered drugstores twice. Once to buy, once to return. Investigators examined thousands of hours of whatever limited surveillance footage existed in 1982, which was very little. They interviewed hundreds of people. They followed thousands of leads. And after months of investigation, they had no suspect, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no physical evidence connecting any individual to the tampered bottles. The case went cold, but it never closed. While the investigation struggled, The world was changing at extraordinary speed in response to what had happened. The manufacturer, facing the largest crisis in its corporate history, made a decision that is now studied in every business school in the world. Rather than minimize, rather than deflect, rather than argue that the tampering was not their fault, they acted. They pulled 31 million bottles. They destroyed their entire existing stock. They worked with government and law enforcement on new packaging standards. And then they invented something. The triple seal packaging. A foil seal under the cap. A plastic seal around the neck of the bottle. A sealed box. 3 separate tamper-evident barriers between the product and anyone who might interfere with it. This packaging became the global standard for over-the-counter medicine. And then Congress acted. In 1983, less than a year after the deaths, the Federal Anti-Tampering Act was passed. For the first time in American law, it was a federal crime to tamper with consumer products. The FDA issued new regulations requiring tamper-evident packaging across entire categories of consumer products. The food industry followed. The beverage industry followed. Every consumer product industry in the world followed. The sealed cap on your ketchup bottle, the foil under your vitamin container, the plastic wrap around your medication, the inner seal on your coffee jar. All of it, every single piece of it, exists because of what one unknown person did in the Chicago suburbs in the first week of October 1982. They killed 7 people. They terrified a nation. They changed federal law. They changed global manufacturing standards. And they were never caught. In the 4 decades since the murders, investigators have focused significant attention on one individual, a man who lived in the Chicago area in 1982. A man with a documented history of sending threatening and extortion letters to corporations, including a letter sent to the manufacturer of the tampered product in the weeks after the deaths, demanding $2 million to make the poisoning stop. A man who had filed numerous fraudulent insurance claims over the years. A pattern of behavior that investigators noted suggested someone comfortable with elaborate deception. A man whose former wife died in 1982, before the Tylenol deaths, from a cause that was initially ruled natural, but was later questioned, and whose life insurance payout the investigators examined closely. A man who has been investigated multiple times over 4 decades, whose home has been searched, whose finances have been examined, whose background has been forensically reviewed, who has never been charged. He has spoken to journalists. He has maintained his innocence. He has, in the view of some investigators, inserted himself into the case in ways that someone with nothing to hide would have no reason to do. He is still alive. The FBI has never officially named him as a suspect. He has never been arrested. He has never been charged. And here, 40 years later, is where the case sits. A DNA profile was developed from evidence connected to the tampered bottles. A partial profile, not complete, but present. That profile has never been matched to any identified individual. It has never been matched to the man investigators have focused on, because he has never been compelled to provide a DN, a sample in a way that could be used for direct comparison. In 2009, the FBI publicly announced they believed they knew who was responsible for the Tylenol murder. They did not name him. They said the investigation was ongoing. It still is. The case file at the FBI field office in Chicago is still open. The man investigators focus on is still alive, and every bottle of medicine in every home in the world still carries the seal that his crime created. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. 7 people died in the first week of October 1982. They were not soldiers. They were not in a dangerous place. They were not doing anything that carried any recognizable risk. They were at home, in their bathrooms, taking medicine for ordinary human ailments. A 12-year-old girl with a cold, a young man with a headache, a mother with a backache. Ordinary people, in ordinary moments, completely safe until they were not. And the person who took that safety from them, took it from everyone, is still there, somewhere, possibly in the Chicago area, possibly somewhere else entirely, possibly watching the news coverage of this case over the past 40 years from complete anonymity. They changed the world, not through any achievement, not through any creation, not through any contribution to human life. They changed the world by destroying trust, by taking the ordinary safety of an ordinary object in an ordinary home and making it the source of fear. And then they disappeared. Every time you open a medicine bottle, every time you break that seal, every time you hear that small snap of the foil giving way, you are touching the consequence of something that was never explained, never resolved, never answered. The seal exists. The killer does not. If this story changed how you look at your medicine cabinet, subscribe.